In the darkest nights, we find our light. Battered souls, but we won't lose sight. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, we stand tall. United forever. Strength and courage will overcome. Oh, surviving together, victorious, never, never alone. Hand in hand, we'll face the unknown.
We see you, we hear you, and we believe you. Hey, everyone. How you doing? Can you guys hear me? It seems we may have had a little bit of a technical difficulty with the intro playing. So I need to know if you guys can hear me or not. Okay, you can't hear me. All right. Well, guys, you've landed on Surviving Together, a safe space for trauma survivors to come together, connect, and build community on their healing journeys, as well as providing trauma-related education for all. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. Uh, YouTube now has this thing where it will show you your vertical, so like what you will look like in shorts, so that you can keep in frame for if somebody is watching you on I think on a phone, or for when it does the shorts, that you're still in the frame. And it was playing it on that, but it wasn't playing it on the main screen. Did you guys actually see the intro? I don't know. Weird things going on. Anyway, uh, I would love to have a fiber optic connection. They have got it in our areas around here, but not to my home yet. So, Deidre Gore, you are one lucky girl. You saw the intro. See, now that's so weird because it wasn't playing on my screen. We're just gonna roll with it today, guys. We're gonna roll with it. So happy Saturday. It is 3 o'clock here in Eastern Standard Time Zone. I heard from my friends up north. Crystal is here. Welcome, Crystal. I heard you might have snow. Yeesh. We do not have snow yet. It's a little chilly, but we don't have snow yet. So Diagore is here, and yeah, and Crystal is here, and Indigo. That was the other one I saw. Indigo popped in. Oh. See, I'm not even in the middle of nowhere, Deaudrey, and I can't get fiber optic. No idea what's going on. But anyway, guys, I am really energized about this topic today. This is going to be the first of a set of videos, I hope. Um, I wanted to cover the topic of human trafficking for a while, and I decided to reach out to some experts on LinkedIn. So I have connected up with a whole bunch of people in the US and from different countries around the world, because I want to get a sense of what's going on, what they're seeing in their countries, as subject matter experts in their countries. How are things going? Um, what do they see? What are their issues? What are their problems? I can look at the global reports, I can look at the reports from the UN, but I want to see boots on the ground, what's facing you every day in different countries. Because human trafficking is something that affects everybody, right? And as somebody from the US, it's a topic that's discussed, I think, when we have big arrests like we recently did here in Florida, and I'm gonna bring up that operation, but it's so much bigger, and we need to be thinking about it on a daily basis. We need to be on the lookout for people, just as we talk about, uh, grooming and looking in your local communities for people, adults and kids who might be being groomed or love bombed by somebody and isolated and potentially being sexually assaulted or exploited. It happens on a larger scale. And domestically, this happens in the United States. And as I was looking at the numbers, there was a 2024 report from the State Department here in the United States. They estimated that around 27 million people are trafficked every year, and that's globally. And I was trying to find the numbers from the US, but of course, the numbers are always a year or two behind, and B, underreported. So it's hard to get accurate numbers on human trafficking. And if people in the United States want to say, well, doesn't really happen here. Oh, yes, it does. Uh, the United States, the number of people who are trafficked from the United States is on par with like all of Europe. Uh, the other surprising number was the amount of women being trafficked out of Africa, which is not something you hear about. At least it's not anything that I have heard about very often. So I was really surprised to look at those numbers. But when I was looking at them and comparing, and these were numbers from 2022 that the UN put out, the number of people being trafficked from all of Africa, and again, these are just the ones that they're able to document, right, is on par with the United States. We're talking about the continent of Africa being compared to the number of people being trafficked in the United States. How mind blowing is that? So, if the United States wants to say, we don't really have a problem with this, mm, and I'm saying not in terms of leadership, because the people in the know, the people in law enforcement, the people in the government, this is something that they talk about. It is something that they recognize, but we don't think about it on a daily basis. And I think about all of the people in the service sectors, particularly if you're in any of the border states, whether it's northern border or southern border, or uh, main corridors like highway corridors. And if you're working in any of the restaurant industries, you know, airplanes, keeping an eye out for people who might be under the thumb of somebody and being trafficked. And it struck me when I was flying through Minneapolis. I flew through it on my way to Vancouver and on my way back. And on the back of the bathroom stall, they actually have a notice that says, um, this is like I don't know if it's national or if it's just US, but supposedly if you put up four fingers and then you close your fist, that's a sign um, if you were to do that to any airport worker, they're to recognize that as you are signaling distress. I am being taken against my will. Please help. And I found that so interesting. And I thought this should be on the back of bathrooms everywhere. I mean, this is something that, we as if we're walking down, we're walking down the road or something and somebody is being, trafficked and they're, close to somebody and they're at a store, grocery store or something, and it's the only way that they have to signal for help. This should absolutely be a recognized sign for everybody in society to say, whoa, I need to take notice of this. I need to call somebody. I need to, take a description. I need to look at where they're going or who they're with. Um, and so that is one of the reasons why I am reaching out to these subject matter experts on the subject of human trafficking. Not only people who are boots on the ground in different states, but also in Washington. Um, I'm trying to connect with a lady I've identified who works for the National Missing and Exploited Children's Organization in the US, as well as I've contacted somebody in the Netherlands, somebody in Australia, and I think there were a couple of other countries. Canada was one, and a couple of other ones that I hit upon that I want to hear what's going on for them. So I want to cover what is human trafficking, and I want to get into the signs and the signals and what can we do about it as just this as our layperson in society. What are the issues? What do we need to be looking for? How do we help? What services are out there to help support survivors of human trafficking? How do we stop it? Right? Because it really needs to be everybody's problem. That is one of the reasons that human trafficking is allowed to exist on the scale that it is that it's an invisible issue. These people, they scoot under the radar. They don't have choices. All their choice and their agency is taken away from them um, by their traffickers. Crystal says, yes, it is an international sign of distress. And bully for you that you knew that. I never knew it until I went through that airport. No idea. Everybody should know this. And maybe more people know it than I think. But I had absolutely no idea. Hi, Body. Hi, Tiffany. Roblox. Uh, Roblox kid. Got it. Trying to get the wording on your handle there. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, wow. Yeah. See, this is the type of thing that I want to talk about in some other videos as we get into really the nitty gritty of human trafficking. Indigo says, I remember a few years ago, traffickers posed as Uber drivers. Stay safe, use the ride with PIN, check the license plate, share your ride with a friend, track your location. Absolutely. Hi, Tiffany. How are you? I'm not sure if I said hi to you or not. So, what are we talking about when we talk about human trafficking? Let's start there, right? Human trafficking is um, there's two main categories, and it's sexual exploitation and forced labor. Those are the two big categories. Now, there are some other categories that are, let's say, lesser known, um, not as high profile, and I'm going to talk about that towards the end. But most everything that I'm going to be speaking about in the majority of the show here is going to be focused on forced labor, and that can be physical labor. forcing you to, be a nanny, or forcing you to work in agriculture, or I saw issues of forcing kids to beg. And now they're calling it cyber slavery, forcing people to engage in online scams. And I think all of that then would fall under the forced labor category. And then anything that has to do with sexual exploitation on the other side. Hi, Carmel, how you doing? Oh, this is interesting. Georgia, so I've never seen that before, that hand signal, but I've heard about a thing about putting a spoon in your pocket at the airport. That is interesting. I've never heard of that. Honestly, I didn't know about any of it. And maybe if you're in the service industry, any type of service industry, let me know in the comments. Is this something that you've heard of? Are you trained in recognizing trafficking victims? Because I think it should be part of every service worker's training. When you're coming into contact with customers and the public on a daily basis, this is definitely something that everybody should know, and it should be an international thing, right? So that across the world, no matter where you are, that's going to be recognized as the symbol of help, right? Indigo says, I was not trained in that when I worked in retail slash food industry. It's been so long since I was in retail. I can tell you it definitely wasn't when I was, but we're talking 30 some odd years ago, right? Uh, I wonder if it is more now. And it may depend on where you are. If you're in areas where, you're working in restaurants or stores, truck stops, areas where there are the corridors and there's a high percentage of trafficking victims that they know that go through there, maybe it's geographical in terms of where people are getting this training. But I'd be interested. Let me know. Where are you from? Uh, city, state, if you are open to that, or just state. What type of industry? Have you ever gotten this training? So, in general, just to bring a bit more of an overview to this, the people who are targeted the most for this, just as in any of the grooming cases we've talked about, are going to be people who are the most vulnerable, whether they're vulnerable because they're children, because they're naive, because they come from unstable living situations, whether that's just outright poverty, unstable homes, single parent, where you've got one parent who's working all the time, or you're that single parent, right? And you're desperate for money. And undocumented workers in the US, this is a huge, huge issue I found with the numbers. Um, Big percentage of people who are being trafficked are undocumented people, because they're going to be afraid to go to the police. They're going to keep their mouth shut. Most of them are not, their job prospects are fairly limited because they're undocumented. So they're an extremely vulnerable population. I do have some points brought up here from a 2024 report that was put together by the United Nations. And a lot of these numbers, the most recent numbers they were working with, were from 2022. They did see a significant downtick in human trafficking during COVID, but as soon as the lockdowns were over in the different countries, it started increasing again. So from its low point during the lockdown, it's increased about 25% from 2020 to 2022. Majority are still women and girls. And it's interesting that the reasons as to why people are trafficked, about 60% of the women are trafficked for sexual exploitation, about the same percentage in kids, in girls, I should say. And then on the boys' side, about 60% of them are taken for forced labor. So something that has to do with, whether it's the cyber scamming or begging or just, working wherever. So the reasons as to why they're being taken is a little different. There was a couple of other things. This point, of course, it makes sense to me that most of the trafficked persons, most of the people, most of the traffickers are involved in some form of organized crime versus some individual just, doing it on his own, which makes sense because it's going to take a lot of resources to get people from point A to point B, to build your network, to have your network of people who you're selling, you know, basically selling either the forced labor or selling the person for sex to. So that of course makes sense to me. Um, but this increasing number of women being trafficked out of Africa, uh, their numbers in 2022 were about 16,000, and that was pretty much on par with the numbers that they were estimating um, in the United States. Um, I need to look at the report more carefully because I think that number is much higher. And again, that was from 2022, though. We're in 2025. And so the biggest thing that I'm going to do today is go through some of the operations that have been done both globally and in the United States, since that's where I live. And we have a huge, huge problem with this, so that you guys can see and understand the true scope of what we're talking about here in human slavery. There are a lot of stories where one person was arrested and one person or two people were saved, which is really important. But when I really went digging, finding the amount of stories where there were double digits of people who were saved was just mind-boggling to me. And then in a lot of those cases, it was single digit numbers people who were arrested as traffickers. So it doesn't take a whole lot in terms of the number of people to manage a large population of trafficked people. Hey Hollywood, how you doing? Hey Janet, what's going on? Janet says, here are the Irish stats for what it's worth. 103 in 2017, 64, 2018, 42, 2019, 38, 2020, 42 in 2021. Interesting. I actually have a case that's a global case that is partially out of Ireland. So this can be interesting to you, which I'm going to talk about towards the end. Janice says forced labor gets into the issue of slavery on an international level. Slavery in the fishing industry is huge. Interesting. I wonder if that is something that is particular to Canada, or is this something that you think that you see more internationally? That's not an industry that I would think about in terms of forced labor. I think about more as domestic workers, like, maids, nannies, servants, and agriculture. That's when I think of forced labor, that's what comes to my mind. So it tells you is how much I still have to learn about this, guys. This is not anything that I'm an expert in. I I know the basics, and so I'm really interested in connecting up with these subject matter experts and having them on and bringing this issue to you guys, so that we can all be better informed. And then also to, in addition to the subject matter experts, to have some survivors on as well. And I've connected up with a few of those, and even with I've got a lead into somebody else who you guys actually may know. So we'll see what happens if I'm able to connect up with him. So when I was looking at this, what did I find? Um, wow. Can I just say wow? I'll start with the United States first, and then we'll talk about the few international cases that I came upon. Um, Florida, just recently, and then this is why it brought it to the forefront again. Florida initiated Operation Home for the Holidays in November, and they actually rescued 122 kids ages 2 to 17. That's huge. That's an enormous number. Carmel, I have no idea why you're missing names and people in the chat. I can see them. I don't know if other people can. Janet says slavery on the high seas. People are forced to stay on the boats throughout the world mostly. Wow. I never would have thought about that. See, I am learning so much. What pinged to me when I heard about this most recent operation that Florida did was it was tickling something in my brain that, hey, earlier in the year, I thought I heard about something like this where they had an operation where they saved kids in the numbers of double digits. Um, and so I went back looking in regards to Florida, and sure enough, in July of this year, they had Operation Dragon Eye. 64 kids were rescued, and 8 people were arrested. And just a few weeks before that, they had Operation Lightshine, which is also a nonprofit organization. It's the name of a nonprofit organization who helped coordinate and offer their services, their resources, along with the law enforcement. And this was in a different part of Florida. It was in Northeast Florida in Jacksonville. So if you think about, I can't do it like that. If you think about Florida being like this, and this is the panhandle here, Jacksonville's like over here. Um, the 64 kids were in the Tampa area, and the 122 kids, I think, were more from the southern area that they rescued. But there were 29 kids in the Jacksonville, missing kids that they rescued from the Jacksonville area in June, July timeframe of this year. We're just talking about 2025, guys. And I've only gotten to one state. So add all that up, and that's over 200 kids. That's mind-boggling. And actually, I found a report it was issued in put out in 2024 by the University of Florida, and by their research, they estimate that over 700,000 people are trafficked in Florida alone each year. That's just Florida, guys. That's insane to me. I mean, think about that. And what they found is over 400,000 of those were undocumented workers. So it just tells you, uh, how much how vulnerable that population is, and they don't have a lot of options for earning money um, legally, right? Because they don't have the paperwork. Guys, I don't know why you're not seeing people's names. If you're not, I would say try going out of the chat, maybe try, clicking over to another channel and coming back. Sometimes when I have weird things that are happening with me, or I can't leave a comment or something like that, getting out and coming back in sometimes help, or close your browser and come back. Maybe you'll be able to see everybody that way. No tech guru, it's my only recommendation. So what else do we have in the United States? Well, in October in Texas, there was Operation Lightning Bug, where they rescued more than 30 missing kids. And these were kids who were being trafficked. And along with that, there were more than 120 other kids who said that they were there voluntarily. Uh, whether they truly were, whether it was actually under coercion, but who voluntarily went home. So I am considering that is 150 kids rescued out of trafficking situations in Texas last month in that one operation. In April, they had another raid, and they rescued 8 kids. Actually, I think it was 8 people. I won't say kids for that one because I don't have that broken down into kids. Because remember, it's adults and kids getting trafficked. In Nebraska, in August of this year, 27 people were being sex trafficked who were rescued. 10 of those were kids under 12. And these were all undocumented people, the adults and the kids. Yes, I am streaming in mobile and regular. That is a new feature of YouTube. If it's causing problems, guys, if it's not working, if you're viewing on your mobile and you're having issues, or you're viewing on your PC, let me know, because this is something that they just rolled out about a week ago. And this is only my second live in this format. So keep me up to date with any issues that you guys run into. With those 27 people being rescued, 5 people were charged with being the traffickers, and there was another 14 people, adults, who were there, who they did not identify as like the head traffickers, but they were there and they were, part of it basically, and were assisting with the operation. So 14 others were arrested as well. And this was just in August of this year. In Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. So they share a border, right? And the city of Kansas City is in Kansas and Missouri. So within that area, in both states, within that city, they rescued 31 people. Of those 31, 14 were missing kids. 14 were missing kids. That, wow. It blows my mind. And they had a total of 82 arrests. Now, they did not break that down to let me know how many of those were the traffickers, how many were what they considered like low-level pimps, how many were people who were, the buyers, but 82 total arrests, surrounding those 31 that they saved. That's just one operation that they did, guys. That's just one operation. I'll make sure, uh, I'll go back to standard format with the next live, and we'll see how that goes. In California, and this took place in late January, early February, last week of January, early February of this year, they rescued 177 people who were being trafficked. Now, within that number were they were including people who were being prostituted, basically. Um, and so the line is kind of blurry as to whether they're there voluntarily or they're being coerced. Are they being held against their will? Uh, I think that there's a good argument that the majority of those people, if they had better options, would not be there. But 11 of those 177 people were kids, were minors. A total of, I think it was greater than 30 people they identified as sex traffickers who they arrested. And in total, so buyers of the sexual exploitation and people who were part of the seller organization, they had 547 arrests, which, yeah, if there's not a market for something, there isn't a need for trafficking the people, right? So I understand it's important focusing on the buyer side as well, saying, "Hey, listen, this is not okay. You can't be buying people." Um, I just really hope that there's the services available for those people once they're rescued, that they're not just kind of, you know, hey, we got you out of that, but they don't have any better options and they basically end up in a similar situation. So we're going to talk to some people who are boots on the ground with supportive services and what that looks like for the survivors and how they try and keep them out of ending up in the same type of situation. And that was called Operation Reclaim and Rebuild. And it's something that they actually do, it looks like every year around the 1st of February. And the numbers are heartbreaking. I mean, this was by far, I think, the largest one that they had. I think that the Super Bowl was in LA this year. I believe that that's what I read, and that was part of the reason why they had so many people and so many people there. But the numbers were like in still in the hundreds and 200s that they were arresting in the previous years when I was looking at the operations that they've run in the past 3 years. So that was just an afternoon's worth of searching and looking for like the biggest numbers. I don't know about you, but it's just to me, it's heartbreaking. And I live in Michigan and you want to think, oh, well, it doesn't really happen in my backyard. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. There was just a big bust at the end of last year. So the end of December in the Detroit area. where they shut down a whole bunch of massage parlors where women were being uh, trafficked out of there, as part of their masseuse duties. So it does happen in my backyard. Uh, my city here in Michigan is right on the route from Chicago to Detroit. I'm about halfway. So I would have to be willfully blind to say that it doesn't happen in my backyard. Not with I-94 running straight through my city, or I-96, I mean, running straight through my city. I'm sure if I dug deeper, I I would find even more in regards to individual states and the operations that they've done. And of course, like I said, there's operations that they're running all the time that are going to let net lesser numbers, and they're just not as publicized. But what did I find on a global scale? Well, there were a few really noteworthy global investigations, and global busts that occurred. One was, let's see, I'm just going to go kind of in order of this. So in July, there was Operation Global Chain, and this focused mainly on Europe, but there were a few other countries around the world where they did either make arrests or people were trafficked from. In total, there are about 64 different countries that were involved in this investigation. So this wasn't a small operation at all. And this was human trafficking for sexual exploitation and forced labor. They identified nearly 1,200 survivors, 1,194 to be specific. And that's just as of the publication of when this was published in July, right after they had this. Whether there were other victims that they ended up identifying, afterwards, I don't know. I can see the number, increasing above 1,200 easily. Most of those were adult women. And of those women, the majority of them were from four countries: the Ukraine, Romania, Colombia, and China. They made 158 arrests of people who were actively involved in the trafficking schemes, as well as identifying another 205 potential traffickers. How many of those ended up being arrested? I don't know. I wasn't able to find a follow-up story for this. Those are huge numbers, guys. Huge, huge numbers. And it is good to see that there are many treaties and many agreements around the world, between governments who want to stop human trafficking, sexual exploitation, um, uh, child sexual abuse material, um, being circulated online. And so one of the other uh, large scale global operations that occurred then was in September of this year, September 2025. Europe, Europol, just like Interpol, right? Europe police, the Irish National Police, and the Brazilian federal police. So they all got together and they had identified a trafficking ring that was bringing people from South America to Europe. And they ended up arresting a total of 8 people who were basically like the heads of the trafficking ring, 4 in Brazil and 4 in Ireland. So Deidre Gore, this is a story for you. They had identified before they made the arrest, they'd already identified um, 28 victims and were reaching out to those people. But they said that over the time that they had been in operation, they suspect that there were hundreds of people who were trafficked. And so they were actively still researching that angle to see if there were other people downstream who had already been moved on from different areas who they could identify and potentially rescue. So I'm going to talk about one more global human trafficking ring that was busted. And what I want you to really get out of this, have you guys stopped chatting altogether? Because I have absolutely no new chats involved in this. Um, or maybe it's a subject you guys just aren't interested. I personally was fascinated by this because it really drives home the international scale of this problem and where the connections are going. I mean, people are going all over. It's not as if we have just like 2 or 3 main, uh, courses where people are going from point A to point B, whether it's domestic or whether it's transnational. These people are being moved all over from country to country. So in the fall of this year, and this was in the latter part of, um, October, so it would have been the end of September and October. It was a 6-week operation, and it was called Operation Global Impact. There was a organization, a nonprofit called Our Rescue, who was instrumental in helping to get organized. Um, Tim Tebow, who is an NFL player or ex-NFL player. I'm not sure if he's retired or not now, but he has a foundation and he focuses on his foundation focuses on saving children on human trafficking issues, child abuse, things of that nature. They work together along with, um, did I write down how many countries were involved? I don't know how many countries in total were involved in this. It was dozens. Oh, I have them listed here. It was dozens of countries that were involved in the investigation and the operation. This focused on traffickers and victims across Latin America, Asia, and Europe. I found their final report, and from that final report, they state that there were 338 survivors who they were rescued. 74 were kids. Uh, 55, 55 were in Peru alone. They're women in Peru, and they were from Peru and Guatemala. 243 people were arrested. So this was a significant operation. I have a few of their details here. So there was somebody from southern Chile who they arrested who was creating CSAM, which is child sexual abusive material. Uh, they rescued a girl in Santiago. There were minors were being trafficked across Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. Um, Children who were being exploited because of the tourism industry. Some of you may know that area of the world, Southeast Asia, is really kind of a hotbed for they call it pedophile tourism, basically, um, because it's fairly easy to go over there and buy a kid for a day or a few hours or a week. Um, some of these is families who offer up their children because they're just that poor, and that breaks my heart. I've watched several documentaries on the area and on operations that they've done in the area, and just absolutely that kills me that they have to do that. Ramel says it happens everywhere in the world. It is not taken serious enough. We in the Netherlands have 20 and Dutch, and the rest was from Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, and Nigeria. Oh, stats from 2023. Yeah. Um, I actually have another story that is related. We're not talking about moving people, right? We're not talking about the person live being trafficked, but I do have another story that involves the Dutch authorities where you guys did something good. You got it right. Um, I'm just looking at my notes real quick here to see if there were any other stats from this. Um, they had dozens of people who were arrested in Spain. Um, and it's interesting reading through some of these more individual stories as to how the methodology that the traffickers were using, and it's differs for different places. In Spain, the women were deceived with false uh, can't even talk, false job offers, and then were forced into sexual exploitation. Their passports are taken, any other identification is taken, their money, and then they're forced to work off their debt or just forced into sexual slavery. In where was it? Oh wait, I don't have the country, but in one of the other countries, the main methodology was that they were, utilizing social media and basically gaining ideas as to, who are my vulnerable people, identifying them, finding out personal details about them, and then starting a relationship up with them, going through that grooming process, and then getting the women to travel to them under the guise of a relationship. And once there, then of course they're trapped. Hey, Echo, how's it going? So those are just some of the stories out of 2025, guys. Those are your highlights that I was able to pull off, from the internet. And I know that it's the tip of the iceberg, but I think it's a good cross. I think it gives us a good cross section, a good idea, representation of the scale of this problem. Dodger says, I don't know about the rest of Africa, but in South Africa, many people would take crazy risks to get a job. And unfortunately, you see this um, throughout the Slavic nations, Ukraine and Romania, especially, as well as Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, where this is the case. They're being offered jobs of some sort, and they travel, and it ends up not being the job that they were promised, and they're stuck. It is extremely lucrative for the traffickers, and they're very good at hiding in plain sight, as well as when you have a society who is really self-absorbed, and you know, when we don't look out for our neighbor, when we're not involved in our communities, um, we tend not to see these things. There are a couple other areas that are lesser known, not as big numbers, but are some trafficking concerns. One of them, and the reason this came onto my radar is because there was a, a bust in July of this year in Indonesia. They arrested 13 people who were part of a baby trafficking syndicate. So they were preying on expectant mothers who didn't want their children, either um, couldn't afford them, uh, the child was the result of a rape, um, they were, just too young, weren't going to be able to take care of them. And also parents who are in the same situation, either didn't want or couldn't afford to care for their child, and would sell them. They were being sold for about 500, the equivalent of what is about 500 pounds, or about $625 in the US. Out of that, they discovered that about 25 babies in total had been sold, both in Indonesia and abroad, which boggles my mind because I think about all the kids who are in state care waiting to be adopted, and yet there's money in baby trafficking. Make that make sense to me, because it just doesn't. It was a pretty even split between boys and girls, boy and girl babies, about 12, 13, boy, girl. And they were able to rescue 6 babies who had not been, they were waiting to be sold. Basically, once the babies were born, they'd go to somebody who would be a caretaker for a few months. And from there, then they would be up for sale and moved on from there. So just crazy to me that this is still occurring. Yeah, this was just one arrest in one country, right? It's an area that I don't know if I started digging into more that we would find this. The sad thing is, right, that you don't know what these kids were going to be used for. Were they actually being bought by people who wanted a child because they wanted to love the child? Or were they basically just being sold into slavery, whether it was indentured servitude or, sexual exploitation? You don't know. And that's why there's a market for it, right? Because if you go through the state, you've got, and I can only speak to like first world and second world countries. I don't know how the adoption, what the adoption process is like in third world countries, but the state's involved. They're going to check out your home and they're going to check you out and they're going to make sure that you've got enough resources to provide for them and that you actually want this child because you want to raise a child. You're not trying to get them for nefarious purposes. And then your name is on some official document, right? That you are the person who has adopted this child. And if you go the baby trafficking route, you're circumventing all of that. So I do understand why, and it just honestly is something that I don't want to think too hard on because I think about what kind of situations did these babies end up in, right? And that's just absolutely heartbreaking. The other area of trafficking that is underreported, not very well understood, and at least in terms of being reported on, and is also suspected to be increasing, is organ trafficking. So, trafficking people for the purpose of harvesting their organs. And unfortunately, this occurs. People are kidnapped and they wake up without a kidney, if they wake up at all. If they're a really efficient organization, I mean, how much could you harvest? And that's uh, the lowest. That's low, right? That's low. But unfortunately, there is a market for it because I do know wait lists are very long. But I wonder about these people who are the buyers of these organs as to how many of these organs are actually being used in other people or if they're being used for other reasons. Because if you're taking another person's organ into your body, I mean, you've got to be able to match up blood work wise, and I mean, there's a whole host of things that have to go on for your body to be able to accept that organ and then be functional for you. It's not like you can just have anybody's liver. So again, another area that I'm not sure I want to look too hard at because I don't know where these organs are going or what they're being used for. Um, to me, it's a very resource involved human trafficking area, but that's also why it's really lucrative. Is my base understanding of this, so that they can sell these organs for quite a bit. But you got to think about the amount of resources you have going into it in terms of medical equipment and having a safe space to perform an operation and all of that. And then once you take an organ out of somebody, if you're actually transplanting it, there's only so much time you have to get it into the other person, and it has to be kept cold, and so it's quite an involved process. Kamel says China is famous for organ harvesting. It's a huge organization over there. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I think I'd heard that. Um, Again, that would be a whole nother show. I've got feelers out to a lot of people with trafficking, and I want to speak to somebody who's a subject matter expert in forced labor, sexual exploitation, organ harvesting. So there's three shows right there, as well as speaking to people. I've got a lot of feelers out to people who are actually in law enforcement to find out what goes on the investigation side. How do they find out about these rings and what goes into trying to take them down? So that's another show that I want to do. And then focusing on the survivor side and doing a show on, how are we identifying these people? What kind of services? you- What are they suffering? What are they suffering afterwards? What kind of services do they need? What kind of services are available? How do we keep them from ending up in a similar type of situation? How do we support them um, as a community, within our community, or to get them home and get them integrated back into their own community? So wow, that's 5 shows right there. So this isn't anything that's going to wrap up anytime soon. It's a topic that I'm going to continue to come back to and dig deeper in different areas. So definitely will be going on in 2025. Will be something that I will be. Maybe I'll have another one before the end of the year. Just will have to depend on who I'm able to connect with and what their schedule is. We're getting into the holidays now. Next week is the American Thanksgiving. Next week, Thursday, I think it is. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's next week, Thursday. And, then we've got Christmas and New Year's coming up after that. So we'll just have to see how everyone's schedule shakes out. But there is one more story that I wanted to bring to you guys. And this has to do with CSAM, which, if this channel ever gets monetized, I'm going to have to start using CSAM instead of actually spelling it out. So I'm going to have to get into my acronyms, guys. This was this was a case. The investigation began in 2022. 35 countries were involved. It was led by the Bavarian police and by Europol. It was called Operation Stream. And it was because of a service that was created in 2021. Let me know if any of you guys have heard of this before, because this was the first I'd ever heard about it. It was called Kid Flicks. Yes, you heard me right. Kid Flicks. And it was one of the largest online pedophile platforms for CSAM that operated from 2021 to 2025. In March of 2025, I think March 25th to be specific, it was finally shut down. So, yay for that, right? Um, there's just no end to depravity. But the German authorities and the Dutch authorities, Kermel, worked together and they actually seized the servers. The two stories that I read on this, I'm not exactly sure whose country the servers were in, or if they were in the Netherlands and in Germany. I'm uncertain about that. They the numbers were that there were about 1.8 million users globally. They had nearly 1,400 suspects, 1,400 people, users um, of this material that they had identified so far, and 79 had been arrested. So as of the beginning of April, these were where their numbers were. 1.8 million users. And the way it made their money is each of the videos were uploaded at low, medium, and high quality. So the more you paid, the better quality video you got. So, and the difference was with this is you didn't have to download all the videos, you could actually stream them, just like Netflix. They had about 91,000 unique videos that they were able to identify that had been uploaded during its nearly 4 years in operation. Had about 78,000 videos at the time that it was taken down. And they estimate that new videos that about 3.5, so this was the average, about 3.5 videos were being uploaded every hour, guys. I That's hard to wrap my brain around. That is truly hard to wrap my brain around. Um, the one side of you goes, yeah, I know it's bad. And we know there's pedophiles everywhere. We know that anyone can be a pedophile. There's no one stereotype. And with the internet, it's a lot easier for people to um, engage in their activity in the privacy of their home without thinking that they're actually abusing anyone because they're just watching videos, right? They're not actively out there with a live child. And this is, I think, a psychological defense that some pedophiles get in terms of saying, I'm not an active abuser. And as we discovered when I covered the porn industry and the way that porn is getting more and more and more hardcore, and as people are becoming addicted, some people becoming addicted to hardcore porn, they're pushing the envelope in what they want. They get desensitized to what they're watching, and so they go into more and more extreme areas and can end up on the dark web. And perhaps, viewing material that they would not, had they not become addicted to porn, is not something that they maybe would have found themselves in, right? But because they got into the cycle where they were constantly having to, um, there's a word that I'm looking for that I is just escaping me, that they were constantly having to, view more and more exciting, more hardcore material. So those more exciting, they end up in that area. Yeah, unfortunately, Kermel, you are right. And it is, the Netherlands is a hotbed for child porn, and it always has been, going back to the 70s and the 60s. Um, that is one of the countries where was a large source of the child porn that was being distributed in the 60s and 70s throughout the United States. It came from Europe, and came from the Netherlands in particular. And then people started creating it here in the started creating it and distributing it domestically. And then, of course, going back and forth. And that's kind of the beginning of the child porn industry. Once video, 8 millimeter video, and VHS became more available, and people could have them in their homes without having a commercial setup. Yes, Belgium as well. That whole area uh, was was, and I guess could be argued, still is a hotbed, unfortunately. Um, so one of the people who I contacted internationally as a subject matter expert in human trafficking is from the Netherlands, and I'm hoping to goodness because her LinkedIn is in English, so she speaks English. Otherwise, Mel, I may be asking you to be on to interpret. To show your picture. I just need you over on the side interpreting because I really want to talk to this person and find out, as somebody who's living it day to day, what is she seeing uh, from her side of things, from being in the Netherlands. So not everybody wants to talk, right? And not everybody wants to talk on video. So we'll see what happens. But even if I can get her to speak behind the scenes and bring you the information from that interview would be fabulous. So we'll see what happens with that. So that is my just kind of intro to human trafficking. Whose problem is it? It's everybody's problem. And we need to be much more aware, I think, as a person in everyday society to this issue because its invisibility is what allows it to be able to continue. So if we open our eyes and are part of the solution, maybe we can stop some of this. And again, I really feel it falls on education. We keep our eyes open. We're aware of the scams that come through or the people who are trying to get us into relationships or offering jobs that seem too good to be true. Um, but because it is based on identifying those people who are the most vulnerable, it shows the need for support, right? Support on that level to make sure that people have a steady income and stable housing and access to food and having their needs met. Because when their needs are met and you feel safe and you feel secure, you're not going to be vulnerable. So there's obviously it's a huge issue and it's not, there isn't any one solution. This is multifaceted, but I think something that we can all be aware of and help be part of the solution. You'll help translate. Oh, thank you, Carmel. Thank you for that offer. I will keep it in mind and I will let you know if I get into contact with this woman. I have some more messages that I need to send out today and tomorrow as well. I've had 3 interviews right now on military and the sexual assault in the military. It's hard getting somebody to be able to come on because if they're working, whether it is military adjacent or working with active duty people, they are federal employees and they have restrictions. And so it's hard getting somebody to come on and talk about it. So it's taking me a while to kind of do all the research first, finding out all of the different things and resources that are available and how it's different for different branches of the armed services and the National Guard. And wow, it's a lot. So it will definitely be brought to you, I think, in several segments once I get done with this. I do have a contact with somebody who is retired now, so they might be able to become a guest on the show. So we'll see. Again, we're kind of batting up against holidays here. So I'm trying to work out availability with this person and we'll see where it goes. Hey, Judge, how you do? Oh, now we changed it to the judge of YouTube. Woo. I know you got some pretty strong opinions about a few channels. Hopefully all good on this one. All right, guys, that's all I've got for today. Wow, it is 20 after 4 already. Yeah, hot topic, involved topic, something that we're going to continue to come back to and look at in depth and look at each of the individual areas within human trafficking. But next week, Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, is our next live. And that is a special interview with a person named Kristen Klein. She is a trauma advocate, a trauma educator, and we are going to be talking about trauma education, how important it is for not only the survivors themselves, but the support people in their life, and then just society in general. So it should be a really great show, really interesting. She focuses on sexual assault, domestic violence, and human trafficking. I do believe would need to um, I need to look at her bio again, but she is a fabulous speaker. I was only able to speak with her for about half an hour. Very well spoken, knows her stuff. I hope you guys can join us. So that'll be Wednesday at 6 p.m. Looking forward to it. And with that, I will see you off. I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. I cannot believe it is going to be dark here in about 45 minutes. Blows my mind. Completely pitch black by 5:30. What I hate about this time of the year living in Michigan is it is so dark, so early. With that, please remember you are valuable, you are worthy, and you are loved just the way you are for who you are. So, hugs and love from me. Thank you guys for joining me. If you haven't hit the like button, please do so on your way out. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit that bell for the all bell for notifications so you'll always know when I'm coming on live. We are live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern and every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern. We got a couple weeks, but I'm just going to remind you real quick right now. December 5th, I think it is. May have that date off by a day, is going to be the first Saturday of December. And because it is December, it is going to be Dad Joke December. So our last Saturday, the first Saturday of November, we are going to be doing dad jokes. So if you have dad jokes that you love, that you want to share with us in the chat, or you want to shoot me an email and share a bunch of dad jokes that you've got, please pile them on. This should be a good show. I I don't I don't do dad jokes very much, but I'll tell you what, I should get my uncle on because he is like the king of dad jokes. He will call in the middle of the night because he's an over the road trucker. He'll call my dad in the middle of the night and be like, "Hey, I just heard this one." And they're always so stupid. But I wanted you guys to have something fun to look forward to as well. All right. We'll see you later, guys. Surviving together, never alone. Enjoy the outro. Bye.
Through the fire, through the rain, we have walked through endless pain. But we stand, we rise again. Stronger now, we break the chain. Surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. every tear, every scar tells the story of who we are. Not just survivors, but warriors too. With love as our armor, we see this through. We see you, we hear you, and we believe in you. Surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. We see you, we hear